In 1905, a scholar discovered a manuscript so dangerous, so ahead of its time, that kingdoms used it to conquer empires. 2,300 years old. Still shocking us today. His name was Kautilya. The world knew him as Chanakya. In the 4th century BCE, when Rome was still learning to build walls, this Indian scholar sat in the kingdom of Magadha and wrote something unprecedented, a complete manual on how power actually works. Not philosophy. Not poetry. Pure strategy. Economics. Military doctrine. Espionage. Everything a ruler needed to know to survive, dominate, and build an empire that would last. He called it the Arthashastra. The science of statecraft. For 15 centuries, this text vanished. Lost to time. Forgotten by history. And then, in 1905, a Sanskrit scholar named Rudolf Hornell was cataloging manuscripts in a royal library in Nepal. He found it. Wrapped in palm leaves. Covered in dust. What emerged from that discovery would change how the modern world understood power itself. When historians first read the Arthashastra, they were stunned. Here was a text written when Christ had not yet been born. A text that spoke of foreign policy the way Machiavelli would, 3 centuries later. It outlined how to identify weak states and exploit them. How to use spies, not just military scouts, but infiltrators, saboteurs, double agents. How to manage an economy during war. How to choose allies based not on friendship, but on self-interest. How to destroy an enemy without ever fighting him. The scholars who read it first could barely believe what they held in their hands. This was not ancient India speaking about dharma and duty alone. This was ancient India speaking about ruthless, calculated, unapologetic power. And it was precise. Terrifyingly precise. Chanakya divided spies into 7 categories. Some dressed as monks. Some as merchants. Some as courtesans who would sleep with enemy ministers to extract secrets. He understood human nature. Fear. Greed. Ambition. He wrote that every person could be bought. Every alliance was temporary. Every peace treaty was a pause between wars. The Arthashastra was not a book of dreams. It was a blueprint of reality. What makes the Arthashastra so shocking to modern readers is not that it advocates ruthlessness, it is that it demonstrates foresight that feels impossible for its time. Chanakya understood that power is not just military. It is economic. He wrote extensively on taxation, trade, agriculture, and infrastructure. He knew that a weakened economy destroys armies faster than swords do. He spoke of maintaining a network of informants so complete that nothing escaped the state's knowledge. He wrote of the importance of stability in currency and the dangers of inflation. He outlined how to conduct diplomacy through threats, rewards, and the manipulation of fear. He even discussed the importance of having multiple routes to power: military, economic, and diplomatic. All of this emerged from the mind of one man in the 4th century BCE. One man who had watched empires rise and fall. One man who had helped a young king named Chandragupta Maurya overthrow the Nanda dynasty and establish an empire that would stretch across most of the Indian subcontinent. Chanakya understood something that took the modern world centuries to accept: power is not moral. It simply is. And to survive in a world of other powers, you must understand its rules without apology. The Arthashastra predicted modern geopolitics with stunning accuracy. When historians compared Chanakya's strategies to the actions of modern nation-states, they found themselves confronted with an uncomfortable truth. The great powers of the 20th and 21st centuries have operated almost exactly as Chanakya prescribed. The use of spies. The cultivation of weak allies. The exploitation of economic weakness. The careful maintenance of the balance of power. The creation of buffer states. The strategic use of information and misinformation. Every technique Chanakya outlined appears in contemporary international relations. Diplomats and military strategists began to study the Arthashastra not as history, but as instruction. Not as ancient wisdom, but as a manual that still works. Some called him the Indian Machiavelli. But Machiavelli came later. Machiavelli learned from the Renaissance. Chanakya learned from the reality of human nature itself. And that lesson had not changed in 2,300 years. The Arthashastra slowly entered the consciousness of the modern world. Universities began teaching it alongside Western texts on statecraft. Indian administrators referenced it in policy discussions. Military academies quietly studied its principles. What had been lost for 15 centuries was now recognized as timeless. Not because it was beautiful or inspiring, but because it was true. In a world where we watch nations negotiate, spy, form alliances, and posture for power, the Arthashastra feels less like ancient history and more like a mirror. Chanakya teaches us that power operates by rules as consistent as gravity. Understanding those rules does not make you ruthless, it makes you conscious. It makes you awake to the world as it actually exists, not as we wish it to be. This is why the Arthashastra still shocks us. Not because it advocates for cruelty, but because it refuses to pretend that international relations are anything other than what they are. The scholar who wrote it did not judge. He observed. He documented. He explained. And in doing so, he created a text so accurate that we are still discovering how relevant it remains. Every conflict between nations. Every economic sanction. Every diplomatic maneuver. All of it echoes with Chanakya's voice across the centuries. If this story awakens something in you, if you want to understand the hidden patterns of history and power, subscribe to our channel. We explore the minds that shaped Bharat and, through Bharat, shaped the world. We have more stories like this. Stories of warriors, scholars, kings, and the strategies they used to survive. Subscribe now. And join us as we uncover the truths that history tried to hide.